There's something to be said for having grit, that ability to persevere through challenges, that ability to work through difficulty, grit. And I came across a clip from the ACC network, and one of the guys talking is Jimbo Fisher and one of the co-hosts, and they were really talking about one of the players from Miami, Malachi Tony, and they were going through, where he came from and all of that, and the fact that he has grit based off of how he was raised, based off of the environment that he came from. And one of the things that the coach was talking about was when you're recruiting players from a particular area, the culture of how they came up is rooted in grit. And one of the co-hosts, he was talking about how grit is something that you're born with or something that you have to cultivate. And it's so interesting because I thought about that, and then I thought about the parenting of my children. And I'm going to play the clip in a second. As parents, if we have children who maybe grow up in pretty fortunate circumstances, they're not in a tough environment, they're not in a rough neighborhood, maybe they don't have, some, various struggles, we have to find ways to incorporate grit into their day-to-day life, because that level of resilience is necessary for them to be able to tackle challenges. And again, life's going to throw challenges, curveballs, and all kind of stuff at them. And if they don't have grit, then they're going to be unable or unprepared to deal with the challenges that life is going to throw. And so it made me think again, as a parent, how do I cultivate that? That's why for me, sports is so big in our household. It's not about them becoming professional athletes or going to college on a sports scholarship. It's nothing about that. It's really about them understanding how to cultivate and build grit in themselves, how to push through difficulty, push through discomfort, work with other people, push through, understanding whether or not something's an injury or if it's just something that's a little hurt, right? A little bump or a bruise that you need to kind of learn how to work through and manage. Like, this is the reason why sports is so big for us. Again, it's not about, I'm not raising professional athletes. If they're good enough to go pro in something, then obviously it will show itself. But that's not what we're doing on the front end. We're wanting them to incorporate grit, to learn how to work through challenges, to understand their limits. And when they understand their limits and how to maybe push beyond what their perceived limitations are, that then transfers into the classroom, that transfers into the businesses that they'll start, that transfers into working through conflict and conflict resolution with friend groups and being in the neighborhood and all. Like, those are things that are lessons learned by playing sports. But their clip here, and I'm going to play it in a second, on grit, it speaks to that. And I think grit is a component that if your children are fortunate enough to not necessarily grow up in challenging circumstances, you have to find ways to infuse some grit into their life, or they're going to be unprepared to deal with challenges. And I see it often, man, like when I do some speaking or some work with some college kids or even some high school kids, you can tell the ones who have not really dealt with challenges before. Because something that's seemingly insignificant all of a sudden becomes a roadblock. But that's because the grit is not there, because up until that point, things have been very comfortable and cushy. Again, we all have to work through challenges. Challenges are going to come. That doesn't mean that a kid has to be on their own to figure life out. I think it's best to have a village. It takes a whole village to raise a child, as the African proverb states. But on a personal level, we do have to figure out ways to develop and cultivate a level of grit. Hear this clip, and then we'll follow up with some more commentary.
It's as natural as the day is long in every aspect, because that's the way he was raised and coached.
It's like you hear these coaches talk about grit. I want grit. Like, you can't fake grit.
You
gotta have
live
it.
You were born with it and developed it and raised with it, or you're not.
Yep. And Malachi Tony's got it.
Yep.
He got it. I'm
So he said, basically, you're born with it. You got to cultivate it. You got to develop it. But grit is a necessity. And the guy was talking about how, coaches are looking for players that have grit. And the thing is, that is a huge component, because if I'm a coach, I want somebody who's been through something. I want someone who has a level of resilience and knows how to push through difficulty, because stuff is going to get difficult. All right. So if you have children who are in an environment in which grit is not always necessary for them to navigate, find ways to sprinkle a little bit into the mix so that they can build that level of resilience. Because even if they're privileged, they're still going to need some level of grit to maximize whatever it is they are called to do in life. And and I think as parents, that's on us. We got to recognize it. And we got to infuse it so that we can prepare them for what's coming. All right. Well, hey, as always, this content's all about helping you to become the quarterback of your mindset. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. So hopefully this adds a little value into your day. And in the meantime, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. Drop some comments, share this thing out, and I'll holler at you. Peace.